understanding of Vietnamese contemporary art for most people is the Vietnam War. It's about the French colonial occupation of the country. And there are many smaller histories and relationships that get forgotten. All of these kinds of contexts and stories are present inside Disrupted Chorégraphies, an exhibition of 8 contemporary Vietnamese artists from Saigon, Dalat, and Hanoi. As you enter the exhibition, you will come in confrontation with a work by the Propeller Group. Monumental Bling is a work of art that refers to a sculpture of Lenin that was sitting in the Volgograd Square. A monument is something usually whole and intact on a plaza, but in this it's decapitated and set as a piece of jewelry. So the Propeller Group are interested in questioning value, also thinking about how ideologies are stretched from one nation to another nation and how those different ideologies become suited for that particular place. Then you will walk into a room with an installation of Dinculé called Barricade. In this you have French-Vietnamese colonial furniture stacked on top of each other as if it's blocking the way entry to the gallery space. Inside these pieces of furniture are speakers emitting strong sound, the songs of Hame, which is a French-Algerian rapper. And this work particularly refers to the Algerian revolutions. A barricade, it's about what we cannot see behind. And behind this installation is a microphone sitting on its own, as if the voice is absent. In the next room following is one of Dinculé's largest installations made to date, called Erasure.
Well, you enter, you will definitely be aware of the photographs. And I don't know how many photographs there are, but it's about 180 kilos of photographs, so it's quite a bit. I've been collecting them over the years, slowly accumulating, and there's a long story behind why I collect these photos. But the gist of it is that when my family escaped Vietnam by boat in 1978, we left everything behind. So when I came back to Vietnam, kind of been collecting them, hoping to find my family photographs, and they sort of become kind of surrogate family photographs for me. At some point, I feel that I need to do something with it because I don't know what's going to happen to them after I die, basically. So I thought the best thing to do is to incorporate their artwork and hopefully a museum or somebody collect them. You have an archivist that slowly archived these photographs onto the web. And so you have a boat, a modern boat. Yeah, and basically it's, again, it makes reference to the recent kind of boat people, whether they from Northern Africa coming to Southern Europe, or they are from the Middle East. They go to Indonesia and trying to go to Australia by boat. But there's a video of a ship, an 18th century ship that's being burned. And that's make reference to European migration to whether Australia or North and South America. And so I'm trying to connecting different migration history, whether it's my migration, when my family left Vietnam by boat from Vietnam to Thailand and eventually end up in America, or the recent migration by Northern African to, European. And so I'm connecting all this history and I'm kind of reminding people that people have always migrated. It's in the 18th century, it's European who migrating out and now a different pattern of migration is taking place.
You go into the next room and you have Vân Đài Thuan. His work uses architecture as a site of reference to discuss these shifts in time and the shifts in social class.
Những cái bức tranh này đề cập đến một cái phần nào mà cái di sản của những cái cuộc chiến tranh đó nó để lại.
Then you go into the next gallery and you have two young artists, one from Hanoi, Nguyen Huy An, and Lena Bui from Saigon. For Huy An, he grew up in rural Hanoi, north, and propagandist messages are common. So here they're painted on a wall. Sometimes in Saigon you'll find them in advertising billboard material. In the olden days, all painted. And what he's done is he has lifted every single letter of the Vietnamese alphabet from these propagandist messages across rural northern Vietnam. And he's placed these letters back into an index that is without social or cultural propagandist message, the alphabet.
So recently I started looking into a lot of studies of how swarm formations are made in the animal world, and obviously there's always at the back of my head a comparison between what I see in like the other organisms, animals, and then human. And then for example, the bird V formation is they place themselves very strategically so that they can benefit from the wind of the bird before them, so that's why you have that V formation. With the bikes, then you also see a lot of those kind of a diagonal line formation where people benefit from crossing together. So I tried simply by connecting random dots within a diameter, and you can see there's like a sort of a very systematic formation that comes out of it.
Behind Lena Bui and Nguyen Huy An, we have the work of Nguyen Trinh Thi, whose background is in journalism. She is someone who is fascinated with Vietnamese histories, and particularly the way we visualize the histories that are not spoken of. So on the left-hand corner, you have Chronicle of a Tape Recorded Over, which is it's an experimental documentary where she traveled the Ho Chi Minh Trail with a friend of hers, an artist friend of hers, whose father was Khmer from Cambodia and fought for the Viet Cong, which was the Southern Liberation Army. He and Trinh Thi, they did the journey from north to south, and along that route they stopped at many different villages and interviewed people asking of their memory of the Ho Chi Minh Trail during its time of being a very active trail. The piece itself sadly did get the two artists arrested, and so they were not able to completely do the whole retracing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But in this piece you will see a lot of discussion of what took place, and these landscapes are quite absent of any of this memory. You don't see any reference. So Thi's work is very much pointing at what we don't see. In landscape, the other video work in the show, she has collected photography from popular media in Vietnam. And you'll see a number of people pointing at things that don't exist. And these stories are reporting on land confiscation, the creation of nuclear power plant, human trafficking issues, and these are things that you rarely find discussed in Vietnamese media. In the next room you have Tiffany Chung. Her work is often examining cause and effect. She's very taken with maps. She's interested in how space is divided, conquered, bordered, and how these lines and divisions have changed over the centuries, and examining the reasons for the change of those borders. You'll see a series of maps in the show. Then there are 2 video installations. It's all about how do we reinvigorate, remember the past. Then finally we have the work of Junwon Hatsushiba, and he worked with students of the Fine Arts School in Langprabang. He was quite struck by how methods of society were improving themselves and how the rapid rate of change was causing a disjuncture between traditional life and the materialistic life that was coming in through products of plastic through China, or the contemporary attitudes of say, even Vietnam. And he was struck by how similar the issues of progress were in Vietnam to Laos. So the piece itself is a very lyrical, very beautiful narrative that references the symbols from the past and the present, and showing the tension between these two ways of living. So Disrupted Choreographies is a show that attempts to rewrite narratives of history. Thus, the word choreography is understanding that history is never a solid, static tale. It's constantly being retold from different angles, different perspectives. In a way, we also need to remember history is a process where artists rewrite. Artists are investigators, social scientists of a kind that in contexts like Vietnam, where there are very few libraries of anything to do with contemporary culture or even factual comparative histories, these kinds of contexts are even more, for me, much more interesting as a curator, because in these areas history is such a sensitive, controversial space to think. And being an artist and examining their artwork is one of the only spaces available for this kind of space, this narrative to be unpacked. So big thank you to Carré Art for the opportunity to bring to France, which is actually the first major museum show for contemporary Vietnamese art in the world.